Welcome to VeeBee Coding. You can call me Bee. In today's tutorial, we are going to make a SQL trigger that is going to gather information from updates, inserts, and deletes, grabbing the before and after values. And with all of those values gathered, that information will be saved in a new audit table that we will create during this recording. All coding that is used during the video will be saved on GitHub. Just search for VeeBee Coding, go to users, and all coding is named after the title of the YouTube video. So step one, let's make our audit table first. It is going to be very similar to the original table that it is for, but with some slight changes. So for the name of the audit table, I would mimic the original table name. In our example, we're going to make the trigger and everything after our table buckets. But for the audit table, I'm going to add _ADT to stand for audit. For the audit table, you will note the primary key just on its own. Do not specify it as a primary key in your audit table. Just copy the name and the data type. And then for your foreign keys and for any other column, you want to make in the audit table a old value and a new value column for all of those. So in the original table, we have the column name buckets, for the column name category. And then in our audit table, we will make a old _ category column and a new _ category column. Just make sure the data types and sizes match. For our audit table, we also have 3 new columns. We are going to add the action code, the CD standing for code. And this is where we are going to note if the record is from an update, an insert, or a delete. In our case, we are going to use UID. And then, besides action code, the 2 other columns that are brand new will be the system date and system user. And those are handy where if the modify by and timestamp are not up to date. For creating our trigger, we are going to name it similar to the original table. But again, this time I'm going to add _TRG at the end to stand for trigger. And then you specify what table is this trigger for. So we're going to say on DBO buckets, DBO being the schema, after insert, update, delete. Our trigger has 2 variables. So if you work in VBA in Excel, when you make a variable, you might say dim, meaning dimension, and then you specify the variable name. For here, in SQL, we say declare instead of dim. So declare we're using operation, and then we're also going to declare suser for system user. Below, we will say set the operation to either update, insert, delete, based on one of the selects down below, and then set suser as the system user. For our trigger, we're going to start with delete. This doesn't matter the order how you do delete, insert, update. I'm just starting with delete here. So if we're saying if the operation is equal to delete, then our insert into script, we are going to do insert into buckets _ADT. And then we're going to specify in the primary key, which in our case is our ID column, our action code, and we are only going to call out the old column values. And the reason why we're not including the new column values that we made in the audit table is because when you delete data, there is no new value. It is going to be null. So after you specify the old columns, we're going to do in our select, pulling in our ID. For action code, we are hard coding the letter D to stand for delete. And then you're just specifying, grab the column subcategory, or sorry, the category, subcategory, etc. From deleted as D. For the inserted section, you can copy what you did for the delete and just do a find and replace, replacing the old underscore with new underscore. And in your select, replace the action code that we previously had D, replace it with I to stand for inserted, and make sure your select ends with from inserted as I. And this is the flip side of the delete. So we are not specifying old columns because when you insert a new record, there is no old value. It's going to be null. So now for updates, it is going to be a combination of the deleted and inserted. So you can just copy what you did on the last two inserts, inserting into buckets underscore ADT, still specifying our primary key, which is ID in our case, action code. And to keep things simple and organized, I suggest copying all of the old audit columns first, and then all the new columns, or vice versa, as long as they're all grouped together. And then you end with system date and system user. When you get down to the select for the insert, change the action code to U to stand for update. And then you'll have all of your deleted values first, and then all of your insert values. So for finding where the trigger is later on, go directly to the table, and then you can expand the section beneath it to see the triggers, expand the triggers, and you'll see it there. You can also view the coding or alter it later on, similar to when you make a view. Just right click on the trigger, go to script trigger as, and then either go to the create to or alter to, going and then following up with new query editor window. After you have your audit table created and your triggers created, do a few test runs. Do a update, insert, delete. One thing that you will notice is after you execute those scripts, you'll notice it'll say number of rows affected 2 times. The first time is for the actual table that the script is for, and the second time you see the X rows affected, that is because of your trigger. So if you are working on a table, you do an update and you see X rows affected 2 times, it's a trigger. So you may want to roll back and double check if everything looks good. So here I have a few examples of insert, update, delete, working on the same record. And so our audit table, you see the action code, I for insert, U for update, D for delete. We can see all of our old versus new values. And so if you have a lot of columns, this can be a little daunting if you have to scroll to the right a lot. So in our next video, we're actually going to create a view in SQL to pull from that audit table and make it nice and easy. We'll have a from value and a to value column. So there's no more scrolling all the way to the right. And we can also filter down to only display data that is different. versus on the previous tab. Yeah, as you're scrolling, it may be hard to see, like, okay, is this different from this? Is this different from this? It's a lot easier if you have a view that does it for you. And with that, let's hop over to Management Studio. I'll make sure I'm not in the way here. So I'm going to be working in our little prod database. And again, all scripts are going to be saved on GitHub. To make things easier, I'm also going to copy paste some items. So you can also pause the video and copy. If you've been following our previous videos and you already have a buckets table created, you don't have to do these first steps I'm going to show. But I am going to recreate the buckets table and to make a new primary and foreign key just for the sake of this video, but you don't have to do this. To prepare for making a foreign key, I need to make a new table in which the value will be the primary key there. So I'm going to create a table called bucket type, and I'm just going to put 2 values to say a bucket type could be a savings group or a spending group. So now I'm going to create a new table for buckets. And actually I need to drop, oops. I'm going to drop the old buckets. And now make a new buckets with the ID column being the primary key. And now our new bucket type to be a foreign key that references the bucket type table looking at the bucket type column. In hindsight, I should have named one of these differently, but it's okay. Highlight execute. And to see any new changes, I'm going to click the refresh button. You see our buckets and bucket type. If you are working from the original buckets table, if you want to, you can do this alter buckets to add the amount, due date, and modify by and timestamp that we'll be working with pretty soon. But since I just made the table fresh and I have those columns, I'm not going to execute this. But it's there if you need it. Since we made a new buckets table, let's get some information in there. So let's do a quick insert. There we go. Now we have some data. And just in case, here's that insert again, so you can pause the video. But everything will be on GitHub. 3, 2, 1. Moving on. Let's see. I think I have a few more updates I wanted to make. Since we only updated category, subcategory, bucket type. That's a refresh of a insert into. Now let's do some updates. So I can either highlight one at a time or highlight all of these. And you can see multiple times one row affected, because I have multiple updates that I was working with. So now I can look at this again. So a couple things to note really quick is on some of those updates, I had the modify B be VeeBee5 or VeeBee4. So this is an example where maybe you have the name of a process for the script you can put here, or what if, hopefully this doesn't happen, but what if somebody does an update and they change the modify by to a different user? Well, later on our trigger is going to capture the system user, so the true person who was logged in at the time. But they cannot hide. So now making our audit table. See if I zoom out. I don't want to zoom out too much because then you can't see it. But now creating our audit table, I'm going to do create table buckets because that's what it'll be for later on. Underscore ADT to stand for audit. And now I'm going to say just the primary key one time. At the top, I'm not specifying old and new for the primary key. In your audit table, do not say it is a primary key. We have our new action code column to note update, insert, delete. And then for all other columns, even our foreign key bucket type, make a new and an old column. And at the bottom, don't forget your system date and system user. So I'm going to highlight all of that, execute. And I can refresh again, see our tables. Here's our audit table. Make some room. Yeah, I'll put this on the next line so we can see it all. Okay. So now, if I do a update here, I'm going to update the subcategory for just one item. So note when I update the buckets table right now, we only see one row affected, this comment noted just once. So I just want to call that out for after we make our trigger, we will see it twice. So now, time to make the trigger. We have our audit table ready. So now, let's say create trigger DBO buckets, because our trigger will be for the buckets table, and do underscore TRG to stand for trigger. But you can name it whatever you want. This is for DBO buckets after insert, update, delete. As begin. Now we need to specify our variables. I'm going to copy this section. So declaring our first variable operation, give it a data type and size. Declare our second variable, give it data type and size. So now we need to give those variables a value to work with. For our operation, it is a case statement with 3 different instances, or 3 different win scenarios. So if a record updates in both the inserted and delete at the same time, that is a update. If the value, and specify this first. if the value is from, if the update is stumbling on my words. If the script, there we go, is just inserted, then it'll be an insert value. And then at the end, if all else fails, basically it's a delete. So now we're going to start off with our deletes. We're pretty much going to be working backwards from this logic. We'll first start with our delete logic, then inserted, then update. So going down, if the operation is delete, then we want to do insert into our buckets audit table. Use our primary key, that new action code, and now we are going to specify only the old columns in the audit table. It's old category, old subcategory. Our bucket type, again, that's our foreign key, but treat it as any other column. Old comment, old amount, old due date. And then your system date and system user. Select. I'll replace that X in just a moment, but I'm going to say from deleted as D. So now that it knows what the D is coming from, we can say D.ID. I'm hard coding the letter D for the action code. D.category, D.subcategory. And to make it easy for me to track everything, I'll try to mimic the order and the row number to make sure I don't miss anything. So I have our ID, action code, category, subcategory. Even though I can fit more right here, I'm still going to go down to the next row because that's what I did there. Bucket type. I'm very tempted to type old. Due date. Timestamp. And now for the system dates, I'm going to say get date to get the actual timestamp from that very moment. And then we have our suser variable. So now I want to do the exact same thing for insert, but to save time, I'm going to copy what we did for delete and paste and go down and change this now to insert. Highlight, Control F, click the down arrow, and I want to replace old with old underscore with new underscore. Get a little pop-up. Make sure you place the hard-coded action code to I, and then change inserted as I. You know what? In my notes, I did a lowercase. Yeah, SQL doesn't really care about uppercase, lowercase. It's not case sensitive for this kind of stuff. And also change D dot to I dot. This is changing our alias in the select. There we go. And now update is going to be a combination of the two. So if Operation is update. Insert into buckets audit. ID, action code. And now I'm going to scroll back up and copy all of our old columns. Not grabbing the system date and system user just yet. Copy. Paste. Comma. Now grab all of our new columns. And then we can also grab the system date, system user, since we're here. And now do our selects. Okay, I'll change that in just a moment, but just so I can get our from in. From deleted as D, inserted as I. So I'm going to do ID. Action code will be U for updates. And then scrolling back up to our deleted. Copying down to here. And then for inserted, copying our category. We can copy down to the system user. And go. So there we go, that's our trigger. So I'm going to scroll back up. It's not so bad when you can copy and paste from other sections. So I'm going to highlight, create trigger, all the way down, execute. Whoop. The select list for the insert statement contains fewer items. Whoops. Did I miss something? Line 42. That's not right. Oh no. 150. No. Okay, let's double check our work. So we have our ID, action code, category, subcategory, bucket type, comment, amount, due date, modified by, timestamp. We have our system date, system user. So this was a copy of our deletes. So it has everything. Over here, it must be the insert. Or sorry, it must be the update. We have our ID, action code, old category, old subcategory, old bucket type, comment, amount, due date. I did not copy D dot modified by D dot timestamp. That was it. That was it. Category, subcategory, bucket type, amount, due date, modify, and then our system date, system user. Okay. Highlight again. There we go. Yeah, that was where keeping everything organized, especially by row, old versus new, that helped a lot. So we have our trigger done. Our audit table is done. So now, let's do some updates. Okay, we have our buckets table. Our audit table is currently empty. So let's do a quick update. And I'm just doing, let's update the subcategory of one of these items. But also one thing to note is for the modify by, I am saying, VeeBee UPD for update, just for our example, just to show you the difference between that modify by column versus what our trigger is capturing for who actually did the update. So doing our execute, now we see two records or two mentionings of rows affected. The first one being our actual update to the table buckets. The second one being our update to our audit table because of our trigger, which is really cool. Commit. So now if I look at our audit table, we now have a record from our update. We can see the old versus new. So here we have our water, Sparkle Springs Company. I forgot I had changed that to just be water, so now I have Sparkle Springs twice. Whoops. Yeah. We have our old modify by being our VeeBee, new modify by being the VeeBee update. So here is what I wanted to show you with the system user. It noted VeeBee because that's who I was signed in as. So if I make a new update to make the category, let's actually fix how I want it to be. Here we go. So again, hopefully this never happens. But let's say I will pretend John Doe made the update. Do that again. Updated buckets audit. Look at our audit table. So here's our second record. Subcategory. It's nice and pretty, looks updated. So even though in my update I said, hey, it was modified by John Doe. Well, whoop, I'm in the way. I said it was modified by John Doe, but the trigger remembered, hey, you're signed in as VeeBee. You're the system user. You're the one who actually did the update. So that is great for your audit tracking. So now let's do a few more updates. So let's do an insert where I'm inserting multiple records in one go. So I'm going to highlight. Now it says 3 rows were affected. And buckets, 3 rows were affected in our audit table. I can even go back here. So our audit table shows each record on its own row. So going back down. That was a example of a insert. So now an update example. I know we just did one with the water company with John Doe, but now our audit table has another update record noted. And now let's delete a record. Commit. And since I hit that commit twice or executed twice, it's just saying you have no open transactions. So that's why you see this red scary looking error, but it's okay. I already committed. And take a look at our audit table. We have our updates, we have our inserts, another update, and delete. So you can see with the update records, we have a old and new value, old and new value. For our insert records, it's a brand new record, so there is no old value. So all the old columns will be null. And then for our delete, when you are removing a record, there is no new value. So the new columns will be null. And so with this, as we wrap up, final notes are, as we look at our audit table, it can be frustrating to scroll to the right, just keep scrolling, like what changed? What's different? So in the next video, we are going to make a view that'll easily display just one column for all old values, one column for all new values, and it'll be so much nicer. There we go. And again, while we're doing our updates, let me just pick any update. And we are specifying what values we want for the modified by and the timestamp. So this is where the system date and system user really come in handy in case of, again, hopefully this doesn't happen, but in case somebody purposefully tries to lie, or if you're doing an update, maybe you just didn't update this section, the modify by and timestamp, by accident, or for whatever reason. You know, we still have that record. And yeah. So this is great for if your company has regular audits or reviews. Another reason why the audit table is very handy is because your core table, and by core table I mean our buckets table, it only has one timestamp column. It is only, that's just the last time the record was updated. So if for one day subcategory was changed, and then on another day the amount was changed, but you want to research when the category was changed, well, the timestamp is no longer related to that first change. So that is where your audit table tracking the exact system date comes in handy. And there you go. You have your audit table and you have your trigger for updating or for tracking updates, inserts, and deletes. With one final thought, what happens when you use a rollback along with a trigger? So I'm going to insert one more record into our buckets table. We can see our last example, ID 16. It is currently in the buckets table. I can look at the audit table and see we have our insert record, but I use begin tran. What if I do a rollback at this time? Rollback. Commands completed successfully. I could never say that word. Go back to our buckets table, and it's gone. Go back to our audit table that was updated by the trigger, and it is also gone. So even with triggers in place, you can still do a rollback and not worry about ghost records in your audit table. Hi! Thank you so much for watching. If you found my videos to be helpful and wish to buy me a coffee as a thank you, consider stopping by Ko-fi to leave a tip. If you have a scenario in mind that you would like to suggest, you can share with me those ideas at askvbcoding@gmail.com, and I'll consider them for future videos. Thank you so much. Bye-bye!